My husband returned after 3 years abroad, bringing with him his mistress and a child. I quietly handed him the divorce papers and walked away with my secret fortune. For 3 long years, I had believed he would return in glory. But the day Logan Pierce appeared was only to bring his mistress and their child to the house we once dreamed of together. I didn't cry or complain. I simply placed the divorce papers and the apartment ownership certificate on the table. No one knew that the woman once mocked as a freeloader was, in fact, the mysterious founder of Silk & Soul, the world-renowned luxury fashion brand. I owned enough wealth to make all of Chicago tremble. The day he betrayed me was the day I was reborn, leaving the past behind with a serene smile and a fortune that the world would envy. I glanced at the clock on the wall. It was 7 p.m. The scent of red wine, braised beef, Logan's favorite dish, filled the apartment. On the table sat steaming fish soup, sautéed broccoli with garlic, and carefully plated slices of ham. Everything was perfect, just like the love I had tended for so many years. It had been 3 years since Logan left Chicago for California to pursue the so-called project of the century. 195 nights I sat alone in our spacious apartment, waiting for his hurried calls. He said that project would be his stepping stone to becoming one of Chicago's most celebrated chief architects, so I could live in luxury without worry. And I believed him, just as I once believed in that college love. I walked toward the large window, gazing at the busy stream of cars on Michigan Avenue. The neon lights reflected on my slender face, weary from years of waiting, yet still gentle. I had grown used to doing everything myself. Fixing pipes, changing light bulbs, going to the hospital when I was sick. From a pampered girl, I had turned into an intimidatingly independent woman. But deep inside, I still longed for the warmth of his arms. Today, he was coming home. A week ago, he had called me with uncharacteristic excitement. His project had been a great success, and he was about to be promoted and transferred back to headquarters. I'm coming home. All week, I had cleaned the house, hand-washed every bedsheet, and spent the whole afternoon cooking his favorite dishes. The doorbell rang, cutting through my thoughts. My heart tightened. It was him. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my emotions, then hurried to open the door. I wanted to greet him with my brightest smile, my warmest hug. The door opened. Logan stood there, tall, with the familiar sharp features, but his eyes were distant and evasive. He wore an expensive suit, looking more mature and successful than 3 years ago. But before I could feel any joy, my gaze froze on the woman standing behind him. She had an oval face, big doe eyes, and a fragile, pitiful look, dressed in a pure white dress. And what shattered me completely was the child in her arms, about 2 years old, sleeping soundly with a face that looked exactly like Logan's. Time stood still. Even the aroma of fine food couldn't cover the scent of betrayal that filled the air. Logan cleared his throat, breaking the suffocating silence. He stepped inside, avoiding my eyes. "Sierra, this is Hannah Moore. And this is Noah, my son." My gaze left the strange woman's face and rested on the sleeping child. My son. Those 2 words pierced my heart like 4 knives. 3 years of waiting, repaid with another woman and a child. Hannah lowered her head, her trembling voice dripping with fake remorse. "Mrs. Collins, I'm so sorry. I never meant to destroy your family." Logan frowned and pulled Hannah behind him protectively. "You don't have to apologize, Hannah. It's my fault, Sierra. I know this is sudden, but Hannah has sacrificed a lot for me these past 3 years. She's the only one who's understood and supported me in my work. And this child deserves to be acknowledged. From now on, they'll live here. I hope you can understand." He spoke a stream of self-justifications, as if all my sacrifices had never existed. He thought I would cry, get jealous, and scream like any other woman. But I did none of that. My calmness unsettled him. No tears, no anger, just a quiet gaze, still and deep as an autumn lake. That very stillness made him guilty, while Hannah unconsciously held the child tighter. I turned away and slowly walked to the bedroom. Logan and Hannah exchanged glances, their eyes flashing with arrogance and contempt. They thought I had accepted defeat, that a housewife had no other choice but to endure. They were wrong. A few minutes later, I returned. In my hand was a blue folder. I walked to the coffee table and placed it down gently. "These are the divorce papers." I've already signed them. I lifted my head, meeting Logan's stunned face, and said slowly, clearly, "Sign them and get out of my house." Logan stared at the folder, then at my emotionless face, as if he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. "Get out of my house." Rage surged through him, crushing his pride. "Sierra, what kind of joke is this?" he barked, half angry, half mocking. "Who do you think you are to kick me out? Look at yourself, you've done nothing for the past 3 years. Everything in this house, from the toothbrush to the sofa, I paid for with my hard work. Divorce? What are you going to live on?" Those words hit me like blows, dragging me back to the past, to the college courtyard where a young Logan in a white shirt had held my hand and said with shining eyes, "Sierra, one day I'll be a great architect. I'll build you the most beautiful home in the world, and we'll have a happy family." Back then, I was the star of the fashion design department. My creations amazed professors. Big brands competed to hire me before graduation. But for love for Logan's promise, I gave it all up. I turned down lucrative offers, choosing instead to stay behind and support him unconditionally. I believed that sacrifice was worth it. When he was promoted to California, he hugged me tightly and promised, "Just wait 3 years, Sierra. Only 3 years. When I come back, I'll make it all up to you." In the first year, he called me every day, sharing his struggles and stress in the new city. I listened patiently, offering comfort and encouragement. In the second year, the calls became less frequent, just a few times a week. He said he was too busy with late meetings and didn't want to wake me. Instead, he began sending expensive gifts, designer handbags, diamond jewelry, none of which I ever used. I needed his affection, not lifeless trinkets. By the third year, his calls could be counted on one hand, reduced to a few cold, polite exchanges. His voice sounded increasingly distant. My instincts as a woman told me something was wrong. I had deceived myself, insisting he was just overworked, but deep down, a crack had begun to form. I had imagined the worst-case scenario, and those divorce papers were my quiet preparation for this day. Yet I never imagined it would come so cruelly, so shamelessly. The flash of memory faded. I returned to the present, looking at the man I had once loved with all my heart. I didn't argue with him about money. Words were useless now. I walked to the wooden cabinet in the corner of the living room, opened a drawer, and took out a plastic-wrapped folder. Turning back, I placed it on top of the divorce papers. "You're right," I said calmly. "Everything in this house was bought with money, but not yours." Logan frowned, confused. "What are you talking about?" I gently pushed the folder toward him with my slender fingers. "Open it." Logan, both suspicious and curious, picked it up. Inside was a slightly yellowed document. As he read the title, his pupils contracted. It was the property ownership certificate. The address listed was this very apartment, but what froze him completely was the name on the deed: Sierra Collins. At the bottom corner was the registration date, June 15th, 7 years ago, one day before our wedding. Logan stood paralyzed. The apartment he had always boasted was his life's achievement, his pride before friends. The foundation of his authority over me had actually belonged to me all along. Legally, it was my separate property. He had no claim to it whatsoever. Logan looked up, his eyes filled with confusion and shock. All his arrogance, anger, and self-importance vanished, leaving only disbelief. He opened his mouth to speak, but his throat constricted as if an invisible hand had tightened around it. Not a single word could escape. The room was silent like a graveyard. The property deed lay on the table. An unspoken accusation against Logan's arrogance. His face turned pale, then ashen. Confusion and humiliation were written in his eyes. At that moment, Hannah, who had been silent behind him, suddenly burst into tears. Tears streamed down her cheeks, her sobbing filled the tense air. She stepped forward, looking at me with tearful eyes. "Mrs. Collins, I know everything is my fault. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, nor do I want to destroy your family. I only want my son, Noah, to have a father. We just need a small corner in this house to take care of him. I don't need any status. Please have mercy on the child." A flawless performance, every word, Every gesture radiated a carefully calculated fragility as if she were the true victim. Logan seemed to snap out of his daze, using Hannah's tears as a pretext to regain his composure and lash out at me. He pushed Hannah behind him and shouted, "Sierra, don't be so cruel. Can't you see how humble Hannah has been? She's only asking for a place for my son to stay. How can you be so heartless? Don't think owning this apartment means you have everything. Once we're divorced, how will you live? You're just a housewife who cooks and cleans all day." He sneered. "Do you think life out there is easy? Without the money I send, you couldn't even afford 3 meals a day." I found it absurd. Lifting my head, my gaze cut like a blade sweeping over Logan's furious face and pausing on Saint Hannah. Without a word, I turned and walked toward the bedroom. Logan assumed his words had wounded me, that I was about to cry. A smug smile tugged at his lips. But he was wrong again. I opened the large wardrobe where my clothes hung. Most were neutral-toned, simple in design, made from modest fabrics, some even worn. Altogether, they were worth less than one of Logan's dinners at a luxury restaurant. Then I flung open the door to the right, revealing a completely different world. Dozens of tailored suits, crisply ironed shirts, silk ties arranged by color. Below them, rows of polished leather shoes and boxes of limited edition watches. The entire wardrobe reeked of money and extravagance. I turned to face him. "Logan, for the past 3 years, aside from the small amount you sent for basic expenses, I haven't spent a single cent of your money on myself. Look at my clothes, do you see anything valuable? But your suits, your watches. Who do you think bought them for you? I don't need to ask. But tell me, what right do you have to lecture me about finances?" His mouth went dry. His face flushed red with anger and shame. Indeed, he had only ever sent me a small allowance, just enough for utilities and groceries. Meanwhile, he spent lavishly on clothes, cars, and parties to maintain his image as a successful architect. He never imagined I knew. Just then his phone rang. Desperate for an escape, he grabbed it like a lifeline. It was his mother. As soon as he answered, her shrill voice blared through the speaker. "Logan, my son, I heard you're back. Is that Sierra woman causing trouble again?" Men having a few flings is normal. A wife should know how to keep the peace. Tell her that if she behaves, the Pierce family won't treat her poorly. After all, that child is my grandson. Before Logan could respond, I snatched the phone. I held it to my ear, my voice cold as ice. "Mrs. Pierce, don't worry. I don't need your son or your grandson. Whatever happens between us, we'll handle it ourselves." Then I hung up immediately, tossing the phone back to Logan. My eyes were empty now, drained of all emotion. That call from my mother-in-law was the final straw. I no longer wanted to spend another second with these people. I pulled out my phone and dialed a familiar number. "Law Office of Carmen Reed, how may I help you?" "Carmen, it's me, Sierra Collins," I said calmly but firmly. "File for divorce from Logan Pierce. Start the full process immediately." "Understood," came the reply. The call ended quickly. I slipped my phone into my bag without sparing a glance at the 2 stunned figures in the living room, then walked straight to the bedroom. The sound of drawers opening and a suitcase being unzipped filled the air. Logan and Hannah exchanged looks. Hannah tugged at his sleeve nervously. "Logan, what is she doing?" "Just putting on a show," he scoffed, regaining confidence. "Do you really think she'll leave? Where would she even go? Back to her hometown? A woman used to luxury, she'll crawl back after a few hard days, begging for forgiveness." Hannah nodded, reassured. Her eyes gleamed with smug contempt as she glanced toward the bedroom. Yes, how long could a penniless, powerless housewife keep up that bravado? A few minutes later, I emerged, pulling a small carry-on suitcase, a 20 inches one, light and compact. I had changed clothes. Simple jeans, a white t-shirt, my hair tied up neatly. I didn't look like a woman betrayed by her husband, more like a college student leaving for a short trip. I took nothing that belonged to Logan, not even the expensive jewelry he'd once given me. I only packed what truly belonged to me. Without looking back, I wheeled my suitcase toward the door. The lavish dinner still steamed on the table now, nothing more than a bitter mockery. As my hand touched the doorknob, Logan's arrogant voice followed. "Think it over. When you calm down and come to your senses, come back. I'll still give you another chance. A chance. He still didn't understand the one who needed a chance wasn't me. Click. The door closed, dividing two worlds. Inside, Logan and Hannah exchanged triumphant smiles. Outside, I stepped into the elevator, my eyes steady, my heart unwavering. When it reached the ground floor, I walked out of the luxurious apartment building I had called home for years. The Chicago night breeze brushed past, cool and sharp. I didn't call a taxi or head toward the bus stop. I stood quietly by the curb. Less than a minute later, a sleek black Bentley pulled up in front of me. The back door opened, and the uniformed chauffeur stepped out, bowing slightly. "Miss Sierra, your car is ready." He gently took the small suitcase from my hand and placed it carefully in the trunk. The car door closed softly, shutting out the noise of the world. The vehicle glided smoothly into traffic. It didn't head toward downtown nor into any ordinary neighborhood. Instead, it turned toward the Gold Coast, where every square foot of land was worth a fortune. Finally, it stopped before the ornate wrought-iron gates of a grand European-style mansion. The gates opened automatically, revealing a meticulously landscaped garden. I stepped out, taking a deep breath of the crisp air. This was my true home. The large wooden doors swung open. An elderly butler stood waiting, his smile kind and respectful. "Welcome home, miss." This wasn't just a residence, it was my creative sanctuary, the birthplace of priceless works of art, and the hidden heart of the name that commanded reverence across the fashion world. Silken Soul. 3 days after I left, Logan received an envelope from the court. He tore it open, glanced at the official divorce summons from my lawyer and let out a mocking laugh. He thought I was just angry, that I'd crawl back after a few rough days. He never imagined I'd actually go through with it, even hiring a lawyer. "So what?" he sneered. "A housewife with no income thinks she can fight me? I'll just throw her some money as charity and that'll be the end of it." Feeling victorious, Logan called his attorney Mr. Ramos, a divorce specialist, and confidently agreed to attend the first mediation session to see what tricks his ex-wife had up her sleeve. The law firm of Carmen Reed was located on the 35th floor of a gleaming skyscraper in Chicago's bustling financial district on Michigan Avenue. Glass walls, minimalist yet elegant decor, everything exuded professionalism and class. Logan walked in with his lawyer, certain that I must have borrowed money from someone just to keep up appearances. In the meeting room, a woman in her early 30s was already waiting. She wore a perfectly tailored gray suit, her hair neatly tied up, makeup light, yet her gaze was sharp, almost unnervingly so. That was Carmen Reed, my lawyer. Carmen gave a polite nod, gesturing for them to sit down without saying a single unnecessary word. Attorney Harper spoke first, his tone slightly condescending. "Miss Reed, we've received the divorce petition from Mrs. Collins. My client, Mr. Pierce, values his marriage and doesn't want things to turn ugly. As for assets, we all know Mrs. Collins hasn't worked in years and has been financially dependent on Mr. Pierce. Therefore, he agrees to provide sufficient support for her to rent an apartment and find a new job." Carmen listened in silence, her slender fingers tapping lightly on the table. When Ramos finished, she spoke calmly. "Mr. Ramos, it seems you're mistaken. My client, Mrs. Collins, is not requesting any financial support from Mr. Pierce." Ramos and Logan exchanged glances, a mix of surprise and mockery. No support. Did that mean I was planning to walk away empty-handed? Carmen remained composed, her voice steady. "Our request is very simple. First, immediate divorce on the grounds of Mr. Pierce's infidelity, which is fully documented and irrefutable." She slid a folder of photos toward them. In the pictures were Logan and Hannah together in California, even images of the two, with little Noah entering and leaving a luxury apartment complex. Logan's expression shifted. He hadn't expected me to have proof. Carmen continued. "Second, regarding assets. The Gold Coast apartment is Mrs. Collins's premarital property, so there's nothing to discuss there. However, during the marriage, all of Mr. Pierce's income is considered joint property. We demand a legal 50-50 split." Attorney Harper let out a mocking laugh. "Miss Reed, you must be joking." "Yes, Mr. Pierce's income is joint property, but Mrs. Collins has lived off that money for years. If we split it, she'll get next to nothing. Realistically, she'd be better off taking the support he's offering. Logan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a smug grin on his face, waiting to see how Carmen would respond. But she only smiled faintly. Then let's be realistic. Carmen opened her briefcase, pulled out a thick stack of documents, and set it gently on the table, sliding it toward Logan. Mr. Pierce, you claim my client depends on you financially, correct? Then please take a good look at this. Logan frowned and picked it up. The first page was a bank statement. His eyes skimmed the numbers until they landed on the final balance, 8 figures. He turned the page, another account, another massive sum. Page after page. Credit cards, bond investments, stock shares. Each page was a blow to his pride. But it didn't end there. Below were real estate records, a duplex in River North, a storefront on the Magnificent Mile, even a villa in Malibu, all under the name Sierra Collins. And finally, the knockout blow, a document showing business ownership. Sierra Collins held 70% of the shares in Silken Soul. The name stunned Logan. He had heard it mentioned at high society events, a luxury fashion brand known for its handcrafted embroidery and silk, rare and exquisite, a symbol of prestige. Attorney sat frozen beside him, mouth slightly open. Logan felt his blood run cold, his hands trembling. He looked up at Carmen, eyes wide with shock and disbelief. The woman he had once scorned, the one he thought only knew how to cook and clean, the one he was certain couldn't survive without him, turned out to be a powerful businesswoman operating from the shadows. The reversal was too sudden, too brutal. Logan Pierce was completely shaken. While he was enduring a psychological earthquake in that law office, I was living in an entirely different world. My classical mansion was more than just a home. The second and third floors had been transformed into design and artisan studios. The air no longer smelled of cooking oil, but of soft sandalwood and fine silk. Morning sunlight streamed through large glass windows, glinting off rows of colorful embroidery threads that shimmered like rainbows. I no longer wore the plain clothes of a housewife. I was dressed in a smoky blue silk gown that draped gracefully over my slender frame. My long hair was loosely pinned with a wooden hair stick, revealing a graceful neck. No heavy makeup, yet an aura of elegance and quiet authority surrounded me, a fusion of an artist's refinement and a leader's confidence. I stood before a large embroidery frame, my skilled hands guiding the needle over black silk. Under each stitch, a blazing phoenix slowly emerged, its golden feathers glowing under the light. My focus was so intense it felt as though time itself had stopped. A young woman, my assistant, Anna, entered quietly, holding a tablet. "I'm sorry to interrupt, Sierra, but we've just received a very important collaboration proposal." Anna never called me director or madam. Here. Everyone simply called me Sierra, a name that carried both warmth and respect. I paused, still keeping my eyes on the embroidery. "From whom?" "From the Montgomery Group, one of the leading corporations in art and luxury real estate investments. Their chairman, Mr. Richard Montgomery, said he deeply admires Silken Soul's creations." I knew that name well. Montgomery Group was a major force in New York's business world, known for projects that blended artistry and impeccable design standards. Anna went on. "They're about to inaugurate a new commercial and art complex called the Crystal Atrium. They want the founder of Silken Soul herself to design an exclusive silk embroidery exhibition space in the main hall. They say it will be the centerpiece of the entire project." It was an extraordinary invitation. The Crystal Atrium was predicted to become a new landmark in New York. If Silken Soul's works were showcased at its heart, the brand's prestige would skyrocket. I stayed silent for a moment. For the past 3 years, dedicating myself to family, I had turned down countless major projects, accepting only private commissions to keep the studio running. I had hidden behind the name Silken Soul for so long that I'd nearly forgotten my original ambition. But now I was free. No more constraints, no more chains. Perhaps it was time for Silken Soul to truly shine. "Tell them I accept. Arrange a meeting with Mr. Montgomery." Anna nodded eagerly and hurried off to make arrangements. I turned back to my embroidery, brushing my fingertips over the phoenix's radiant wings. A phoenix reborn from ashes, perhaps that was my destiny, too. The collapse of my marriage hadn't destroyed me. It had made me stronger, more brilliant than ever. My gaze drifted toward the window, to the towering skyline of Chicago. The future mine and Silken Souls began at that very moment. After I left, Hannah Moore finally moved into the apartment as the so-called new mistress of the house. On the first day, she went around erasing every trace of the woman before her. The pale blue bedsheets I loved were tossed into the trash, replaced with deep crimson satin. The delicate flower pots on the balcony were swapped for garish bouquets of red roses. She even bought overpriced abstract paintings to hang on every wall, trying to create her own Hannah Moore aesthetic. Each change was carefully photographed and posted on Instagram with suggestive captions. Beside a candlelit dinner photo, she wrote, "Sometimes happiness comes late, but when it's the right person, the wait is always worth it." Under a picture of little Noah playing on the new sofa, her caption read, "Finally, my son has a complete home. Wherever there is love, there is home." Each post was like an invisible needle, carefully aimed to pierce my heart. Hannah imagined me sitting alone in a shabby rented apartment, secretly jealous while scrolling through her photos. She waited for a reaction, a curse, a sign of pain, but there was nothing. My account remained completely silent. The profile picture was still a white magnolia, and my last post had been over 6 months ago. It was as if I had vanished from the online world, utterly ignoring all of Hannah's provocations. That silence made her feel as though she was punching the air, furious and powerless. She couldn't understand how I could remain so calm. Meanwhile, our old college group chat was buzzing. A friend with the nickname Lazy Cat messaged, "Did you guys hear? Logan brought his mistress and illegitimate kid home, and Sierra left. Poor girl, she sacrificed years for him, only to end up like this." Another, apparently one of Logan's friends, chimed in to defend him. "Relationships are complicated. He was away from his wife for 3 years, any man could slip up." Someone immediately shot back, "Slip up and have a 2-year-old kid? Really? So what does that make Sierra? A fool?" The conversation grew heated. Some pitied me, while others blamed me. A woman who just stays in the kitchen is bound to be abandoned. It's the modern age depending on a man is asking for heartbreak. She must be miserable right now. Hannah read every line, satisfied when people first criticized me, yet irritated that many still took my side. Even after I had left, I lingered over her life like a shadow she couldn't shake off. She turned to Logan, who sat on the sofa, brow furrowed, and said sweetly, "Baby, why don't you call her? That silence of hers is creepy." But Logan, freshly back from his lawyer's office and in a foul mood, shoved her hand away and snapped coldly, "Creepy? She's just pretending to be some kind of martyr. Forget about her." Sensing his shift in tone, Hannah fell silent, swallowing her anger. She didn't know that in his mind, she and the child no longer mattered. His thoughts were consumed by the discovery of my hidden fortune. The numbers in those bank statements, the addresses of the luxury properties, and the word Silken Soul spun in his head like a storm. His first reaction wasn't remorse, it was blind rage. Lies, it was all lies. He shouted, slamming his hand on the table. The gentle, obedient wife he thought he controlled had built an entire empire behind his back. He felt like a fool, a clown led by the nose for years. His pride shattered into pieces. Then came confusion. How had I done it? Where did the money come from? And Silken Soul, why had I never mentioned it? He began his own frantic investigation. Too ashamed to ask wealthy friends or business partners. Admitting that the wife he supported was wealthier than him was unthinkable. He flipped through an old address book, looking for college contacts he hadn't spoken to in years. Using a class reunion as an excuse, he started making calls. The first was to our former class president. After a few polite greetings, Logan casually asked, "Hey, do you still keep in touch with Sierra Collins? Haven't heard anything about her lately." "With Sierra?" The man hesitated. "You married her, didn't you? The last time I saw her was at the reunion 5 years ago. Still, beautiful, just quieter than before." "Oh, come on, remember? You stole the goddess of our department." "Goddess?" Logan frowned. "Forgot already." His friend laughed. Back then, Sierra Collins was the brightest star in the fashion design department. Her graduation project won the national award. It was displayed at the Art Institute of Chicago. Major fashion houses were fighting over her, offering salaries we couldn't even dream of. Every word hit Logan like a hammer. He remembered vaguely that I could draw well, but he had never cared about the awards or offers. Back then, he was too drunk on his own pride, basking in the glow of having a talented, beautiful girlfriend. We all thought she'd become an international designer, the friend continued. But after she met you, she turned down everything, said she wanted to stay home and support you. We all thought it was a waste. Love really does make people blind. When the call ended, Logan sat frozen. For the first time in years, guilt crept into his heart. He remembered the light in my eyes when I spoke about design, the pride in my smile when I received that award. He had promised to support me, but it was his own selfishness and ambition that buried my talent and dreams. He had turned a blazing phoenix into a mere sparrow in a gilded cage of his own making. But that guilt was quickly swallowed by something darker: greed and envy. If I was truly talented, then my fortune made sense. But why had I hidden it from him? A sinister thought took root. She earned that wealth while still my wife. No matter how she did it, legally it was still marital property. She had concealed it, deceived him, which made me the guilty one. From that moment, Logan's mindset shifted completely. He was no longer just an unfaithful husband wanting a divorce to be with his mistress. He became a predator, a starving beast hunting its prey. Hannah and the child faded into the background. His only goal now was to seize part or all of my secret empire. A month later, the Ritz-Carlton Chicago glowed under the city's night lights. Luxury cars lined up at the grand entrance. The press, top fashion bloggers, and countless influential figures from the business and art worlds gathered, all eyes fixed on one event: the launch of Rebirth of the Phoenix. The new collection by Silken Soul, in collaboration with the Crystal Atrium project by the Montgomery Group. Until then, Silken Soul had always been shrouded in mystery. Their creations never needed advertising. Their reputation spread quietly among the elite, like a treasured secret. The founder was known as a master of silk embroidery, yet no one had ever seen their face or known their true identity. So the fact that Silken Soul was collaborating publicly with a major corporation and hosting its first open fashion show sent shockwaves through the industry. At the old apartment, Logan sat on the sofa, his expression dark. Hannah was trying to soothe little Noah, who wouldn't stop crying. The divorce had dragged on far longer than he'd expected. My lawyer Carmen Reed was unyielding, presenting evidence and arguments that backed him into a corner. His attempts to trace my assets went nowhere. Everything was airtight, untouchable. Frustrated, Logan flipped through TV channels until he froze. A financial network was broadcasting a live fashion event. The headline read, "Launch of Rebirth of the Phoenix Silken Soul and Montgomery Group." The word Silken Soul stabbed right into his nerves. He stared at the screen, the dazzling stage, the ethereal lighting, models gliding in magnificent hand-embroidered designs. Especially the blazing phoenix motif on black silk, not just clothing, but living art. The show ended to thunderous applause. The host stepped forward, voice brimming with excitement. "And now, ladies and gentlemen, the most anticipated moment of the night. Please welcome the founder and soul of Silken Soul." Appearing before the public for the very first time. Every camera turned toward the stage wing. Lights converged on one spot. Logan's heartbeat quickened. He, too, wanted to know who the woman behind that name truly was. From the shadows, a slender figure emerged. When the lights enveloped me, the entire hall fell silent. I wore a silver-white silk gown embroidered with shimmering magnolia branches. My hair was swept into an elegant bun, my calm, refined face radiating quiet strength. I nodded gracefully to the audience, my bright eyes filled with confidence and pride. The wine glass slipped from Logan's hand, shattering on the floor. The sharp sound couldn't pull him out of his shock. Hannah turned, ready to scold him, but her eyes froze too as she stared at the screen. The woman standing at the height of glory, basking in applause, hailed as a design genius, was me. No longer the meek, fragile wife they once pitied, but the queen of Silken Soul. At that moment, Richard Montgomery walked onto the stage, a refined man in a flawless suit, exuding charisma and grace. He stood beside me, his gaze filled with admiration and respect. An artist and a powerful businessman side by side, perfectly matched. That image on the television screen cut through Logan Pierce's last shred of pride like a blade. The next morning, Logan drove to the mansion where I lived. This time, his face was neither angry nor proud but worn and hollow. His eyes were bloodshot from sleeplessness. He had prepared a new script. He rang the bell. The butler opened the door, his expression icy. "I'm sorry, Miss Sierra is not at home. Please," Logan pleaded, "just tell Sierra I know I was wrong. I came to apologize. I'll wait here until she agrees to see me." And he really did stand there under the morning sun that was growing harsher by the minute. He believed that no matter how strong I was, I wouldn't have the heart to leave my ex-husband standing outside like that. He was wrong. Nearly an hour later, the heavy iron gate opened, but it wasn't me who came out. It was the housekeeper, holding a glass of water. She placed it on the stone pillar by the gate and said evenly, "Miss Sierra said that if Mr. Pierce wants to wait, he can. But please don't faint from heat stroke in front of her house and cause trouble for others." Then she turned around and closed the gate. Logan's face flushed red with anger. The humiliation burned worse than being shouted at. But he held it in. He knew he couldn't use force-only strategy. By noon, I finally agreed to meet him in the living room. I sat in a single armchair, a cup of chamomile tea in my hand, calm and composed as if hosting a stranger. The moment Logan saw me, his eyes reddened. He rushed forward, intending to sit beside me, but my cold, sharp gaze stopped him in his tracks. He had no choice but to sit across from me. He began his little performance, his voice trembling with a hint of anguish. "Sierra, I'm sorry. I've thought a lot these past few days. I was a terrible man. I betrayed you. It was that woman, Hannah Moore, who tempted me. But we've had so many years together. Can't you give me another chance?" I took a sip of tea, saying nothing, silently watching his act. Seeing my silence, Logan changed his tone. "I watched the show last night. You were amazing, Sierra. I never imagined you were Silken Soul. You must have worked so hard, hiding it all from me for so long. If I'd known how talented and dedicated you were, I'd never have treated you badly. The company, the brand, everything you built, it was during our marriage, wasn't it? By law, that makes it joint property." He lowered his voice, pretending to be sincere. "Sierra, let's not get divorced. For the sake of our past, withdraw the papers. From now on, I'll stay by your side. We can run the company together, build an empire, you and I." But the mask had already fallen. There was no remorse, no love left, only greed without end. I gently placed the teacup on the table. The faint clink made Logan flinch. I looked up and met his eyes for the first time, clear, but so cold it pierced straight through him. "Logan, are you finished talking?" I asked slowly, each word deliberate. I stood and walked to my desk, taking out a folder. First, the brand Silken Soul was registered, and the company founded before our marriage. It is my personal property. Second, during the marriage, all company profits were transferred into an independent trust account, separately managed, with full documentation proving legal ownership. Third, the divorce, I will never withdraw it. Each sentence struck like a blade, shredding Logan's plan apart. He hadn't expected me to be so meticulous, so prepared, leaving not a single gap. I walked to the door and signaled to the housekeeper. "See Mr. Pierce out. From now on, this man is not to step inside again." Logan stood frozen in the middle of the room, staring at my back. The arrogance on his face melted away, leaving only panic and genuine despair. A few days later, while I was sketching designs for the Crystal Atrium project, the housekeeper entered, looking hesitant. "Miss Sierra, Mrs. Pierce, Mr. Logan's mother is at the gate. She says she wants to see you." I had expected this day to come. Knowing my former mother-in-law's temperament, and after my identity as Silken Soul had become public, it was inevitable she would show up. I set down my pen and said calmly, "Let her in." The housekeeper looked surprised but obeyed. I wanted to end everything once and for all. Mrs. Pierce was led into the living room. Gone was the haughty tone I'd heard on the phone days earlier. Today, she looked disheveled and wore messy gray hair, swollen eyes, wrinkled clothes. The moment she saw me, she rushed forward, tears streaming. "Sierra, it wasn't my fault." She tried to grab my hands, but I stepped back slightly, avoiding her touch. Her hands froze midair. Then she quickly wiped her tears and began her pitiful act. "My dear, I was wrong. I'm old now, I don't even know right from wrong anymore. I haven't eaten or slept for days, tormented by guilt. I came here to ask for your forgiveness." I motioned for her to sit opposite me, keeping a safe distance. I wanted to see how far this performance would go. She started blaming everything on Hannah Moore. "It's all that woman's fault. That vixen seduced my Logan. My son was always a good man, a loving husband. She trapped him, used that child to bind him. That's why he made those mistakes." "My dear, you were the best wife the Pierce family ever had, beautiful, kind, and talented. I was wrong. My son was wrong too." She broke into sobs, then shifted to a pleading tone. "Sierra, for the sake of this old woman, for all the years you were part of our family, please forgive him once. All men make mistakes. If you come back, I promise to throw that woman and her child out immediately. I'll make Logan kneel before you to beg for forgiveness." To make her plea more convincing, she didn't hesitate to humiliate the same child she once called her grandson. "That child, I never saw him as my grandchild. Who even knows if he's truly Logan's, or someone else's? He'll never set foot in the Pierce house again. You are the only daughter-in-law of this family." At that point, my calm composure finally wavered, not from sympathy but from utter disgust. The shameless hypocrisy of this woman surpassed anything I'd imagined. "Mrs. Pierce, are you done performing?" My voice was cold, distant. The word Mrs. froze her smile in place. The distance between mother and daughter-in-law was severed completely. "It was you who called me before," I said, "telling me to forgive your son and your grandson for the sake of the family's interests. And now here you are, insulting them, calling them a filthy woman and that child. Don't you find your words contradictory and shameful?" Mrs. Pierce's face went pale. She couldn't utter a word. I stood, my gaze like ice. "Between me and Logan Pierce, everything is over. I will never withdraw the divorce, and I have no interest in your deceitful, scheming family. From now on, do not come here again." I turned to the housekeeper. "Mrs. Whitaker, please show her out." Mrs. Pierce stood there, stunned, unable to believe she was being thrown out so humiliatingly. She opened her mouth to protest, but when she saw the firmness and frost in my eyes, the words died on her lips. The housekeeper stepped forward, polite, but firm. "Mrs. Pierce, this way, please." The woman staggered to her feet, led out in disgrace. The heavy wooden door of the mansion closed behind her, a full stop to every futile hope she had left. After being turned away from my estate, Logan became a different man. He lost the confidence and arrogance of the once successful architect, no longer the gentle husband or model father he once pretended to be. Most of the time, Logan locked himself in his study, surrounded by piles of documents, not blueprints, but information about the Silken Soul brand, my real estate holdings, and attorney Carmen Reed. The more he investigated, the more hopeless he became. Everything was built like an unbreakable fortress. Frustration turned into constant anger. He started lashing out at everything around him. The sound of Noah's crying irritated him. The meals Hannah cooked disgusted him. The apartment that had once symbolized his success now felt like nothing more than a suffocating cage. Hannah noticed the change. The tenderness and indulgence from before had vanished, replaced by a cold tone and sharp words. She began to feel uneasy. The dream of becoming Mrs. Pierce, the lady of a wealthy family, was slipping further away. She knew she had to do something to secure her place. That night, after putting Noah to bed, Hannah slipped into a silky, seductive nightgown, poured herself a glass of red wine, and walked into the study. "Baby, don't work too late. It's bad for your health." Logan didn't look up, just mumbled a response. She set the glass down on the table, wrapped her arms around his neck, and whispered, "The divorce with her is almost done, right? How about we check out wedding venues this weekend? My dad already asked. He wants to throw me a grand wedding." The word wedding was like a match thrown into a barrel of gunpowder. Logan shoved her off, sprang to his feet, his eyes bloodshot. Wedding? Are you insane? You're talking about a wedding now. Hannah flinched, her hurt showing clearly. Why not? Your son and I deserve a name too. Or are you planning to let us live nameless forever? Logan let out a bitter laugh, his voice dripping with sarcasm. A name? That's all you care about, status. Do you have any idea what we've lost? An entire fortune, the luxury we could have had for life. It's all your fault. If it weren't for you and that kid, none of this would have happened. Hannah froze, tears streaming down her cheeks. My fault. Logan, how can you say that? In California, who swore they loved me? Who said they were sick of their boring wife? And now you blame me? The argument erupted. For the first time, they hurled every lie, every calculation, every disappointment straight at each other. Logan shouted, "If I'd known she was that rich, I'd have been an idiot to leave her for you." Hannah screamed back, "You think I don't see through you? You regret not clinging to that gold mine. You despise me because I can't give you what she had. Logan Pierce, you're nothing but a pathetic only in it for the money." Logan slammed the wine glass on the table, red wine splattering across the beige carpet like blood. They glared at each other filled with hatred, like strangers. A relationship built on betrayal and greed had finally cracked beyond repair. Now, they were no longer allies, just two selfish people clinging to the last scraps of advantage on a sinking ship. While their world fell into chaos, I couldn't care less. After cutting those toxic people out of my life, I poured all my energy and focus into work. The Crystal Atrium project demanded immense creativity and investment, and that only fueled my excitement. But alongside that commercial venture, I had been nurturing another plan, one born purely from my love for the art of embroidery. During a board meeting at Silken Soul, I officially announced the new project. The large screen displayed images of an ancient riverside village, moss-covered roofs, faded brick walls, serene yet melancholy. "This is Havenbrook Silk Village, located on the outskirts of Vermont," I said passionately. "Once it was the country's most famous embroidery and silk weaving center. But over time the craft nearly disappeared. Only a few elderly artisans remain, struggling to keep it alive." I paused, looking around the room. "Silken Soul exists because of the heritage of traditional embroidery. We cannot keep taking without giving back. That's why I've decided to dedicate all profits from this year to launch the Phoenix Rebirth Project." I continued. "We'll restore Havenbrook Village, renovate workshops, modernize equipment, bring in master embroiderers to teach, and offer free training classes for the younger generation. This place will become a hub for production, cultural preservation, and experiential tourism, reviving the golden era of silk embroidery." My plan wasn't a business move, it was a sincere desire to preserve fading cultural values. Soon after, news of the project spread across the media. Thanks to Silken Soul's reputation, Phoenix Rebirth gained overwhelming support from the public and the government. Everyone praised it as a deeply humanistic act, a powerful example of social responsibility from a leading brand. The image of Silken Soul shone brighter than ever. I had no idea that this heartfelt act would unintentionally become a fatal blow to Logan and Hannah's family. At that moment, in the office of a construction firm in Boston, Hannah's father slammed the table in fury. "Who the hell is this woman, Sierra Collins?" Across from him sat Logan, pale as chalk. On the table lay a financial newspaper, the Phoenix Rebirth Project headline dominating the front page. "Do you know where that silk village is?" he growled. "Right. Next to the land we spent months preparing to reclaim for our resort development. Now the government has approved her cultural preservation project. Our entire plan is ruined. Our initial investment could be completely lost." A chill ran down Logan's spine. That resort was supposed to be his last chance to revive his career after a string of failures. He had poured all his resources and connections into it. Hannah, sitting nearby, whispered nervously, "Dad, maybe it's just a coincidence." "Coincidence?" her father barked, laughing bitterly. "You're too naive. There are no coincidences in this world. That woman is targeting us. She wants to destroy every last lifeline we have." Logan clenched his fists, veins bulging. He didn't believe this was chance. He was convinced it was a calculated act of revenge, my masterstroke. I didn't just want a divorce or my assets. I wanted to annihilate his career and future completely. Fear and hatred merged into a single deranged obsession. He turned to Hannah, eyes blazing with suspicion. You knew about this, didn't you? I didn't know anything. Hannah stammered. Logan roared, she's playing dirty. We're completely at her mercy now. Meanwhile, in my design studio, I was carefully sketching blueprints for the Silk Village of tomorrow. I had no idea that this act of compassion was unintentionally driving my betrayers to the edge of ruin. An uncalculated move, but a flawless, devastating strike. The saying, a starving dog attracts more fleas, had never fit Logan better. While he and Hannah's family struggled to salvage their collapsing resort project, another bomb exploded, shattering their last remaining hope. The New York International Business Center project, once Logan's proudest architectural triumph, his ticket to prestige, suddenly became the center of a massive scandal. It began with an anonymous post on an architectural forum, including photos and detailed video analysis. The post accused the newly completed skyscraper of having serious cracks in its beams and foundation. The author, claiming to be a conscientious civil engineer, pointed out that the materials, especially steel and cement, were far below design standards. In short, it was a large-scale construction fraud. At first, the news spread only among professionals, but social media soon turned it into a storm. Major newspapers ran the story. Images of the once glorious skyscraper Logan Pierce's pride were now paired with damning headlines. Substandard building, fraudulent architect, a time bomb in the heart of the city. The investment firm and Hannah Moore's father's construction company were immediately investigated by authorities. The entire project was suspended. As chief architect responsible for design and supervision, Logan Pierce became the primary target of public outrage. The reputation he had spent a lifetime building collapsed overnight. His phone wouldn't stop ringing, reporters, partners canceling contracts, office buyers demanding refunds. He sat in his office, staring blankly at the computer screen filled with sensational headlines. This can't be happening. It can't, he muttered. I worked so hard, spent countless sleepless nights at that site. How did it come to this? Just then, Hannah's father called. His voice roared through the phone like a wounded beast. Logan, you bastard. What kind of design was that? You've ruined us. Logan snapped back, suddenly alert. It wasn't my fault. The design was perfect. It was your company that swapped in cheap materials to pocket the money. Don't make excuses. The man spat bitterly. Everything was built exactly according to your plans. You were the chief architect, you're the one responsible. The alliance built on shared interests shattered in an instant. They turned on each other like panicked animals scrambling to escape the mud. When the call ended, Logan was gasping for air, his whole body trembling. He felt cornered, the darkness closing in. A poisonous paranoia crept into his mind. The timing was too perfect. First, the resort project collapsed. Now, the Manhattan building scandal. Everything connected to him was turning into disaster. How could that be coincidence? Surely, I had hired someone to dig up his weaknesses and leak the information to destroy him. That thought slithered through his heart like a venomous snake, tightening with every beat. From that moment on, in Logan's eyes, I was no longer the pitiful ex-wife, I was a dangerous enemy, calculating and powerful, pulling every string from the shadows. His face twisted with hatred and fear. While Logan's world descended into chaos, my life remained strangely peaceful. I spent most of my time in my design studio, or at libraries and museums, searching for inspiration for the Crystal Atrium project. That afternoon, I visited New York International Hospital. I had always disliked hospitals, but I couldn't avoid this one. Mr. Walters, a silk embroidery master and my very first teacher, had been admitted after a minor stroke. After checking on him and making sure he was resting comfortably, I left. On my way to the elevator, I passed by the pediatric ward. I was about to keep walking, but the desperate cries of a child made me stop. In the waiting area outside the exam room, I saw a familiar face, Hannah Moore. She no longer looked glamorous or proud. She wore simple, slightly worn clothes. Her hair was messy, her face pale and exhausted, bare of makeup. In her arms was little Noah, crying uncontrollably, his face flushed with fever. Hannah looked lost and terrified, trying to soothe her son while staring anxiously at the clinic door. I stood quietly at a distance, watching a swirl of emotions rose inside me. I didn't feel joy or satisfaction. Seeing Hannah struggling with her sick child, I no longer saw a betrayer, only a helpless, broken mother. And the child completely innocent. No child deserves to bear the punishment of adults' sins. A gentle sadness brushed my heart. I wasn't a saint, I couldn't forgive what they'd done, but in that moment, watching the crying child, I couldn't hate either. Only a trace of pure compassion remained, rising above all resentment. I didn't intend to approach them. I simply watched for a moment, then turned away. That chapter was no longer mine. But as I turned, I accidentally bumped into someone. "I'm sorry," I said quickly, looking up and froze. It was Richard Montgomery. He looked surprised, then gave a polite smile. "Miss Collins, what a coincidence." "Hello, Mr. Montgomery. I'm here visiting a friend of my father's," he explained briefly, then his perceptive gaze lingered on my face. "You don't look well. Are you all right?" He didn't glance toward Hannah, only at me. That subtle consideration made me feel strangely at ease. I shook my head and forced a faint smile. "It's nothing, just an old memory." Richard didn't press further. He knew when to stop. He looked at me deeply, then said gently, "Art needs inspiration. Don't let bad memories cloud your soul." It wasn't an empty platitude, it was genuine understanding, the empathy of a kindred spirit. He didn't see me as a divorced woman, but as an artist who needed to protect her creative world. A quiet warmth spread through my heart. It had been so long since I'd felt truly understood. "Thank you," I whispered. And this time, my smile was genuine. Then I left. The image of the frail child and the weary mother lingered in my mind, but Richard's words were like a fresh breeze sweeping away the heavy clouds, bringing back a sense of calm. Meanwhile, the Manhattan scandal and the stalled resort project had pushed Logan to the brink of bankruptcy. Yet he still clung to one last hope. In the divorce case, he would try to prove that part of my assets had been built during our marriage to claim enough to start over. He had no idea that a real tsunami was already forming, ready to wash away everything he had left. At attorney Carmen Reed's office, the air was tense as wire. Her team included not only top lawyers, but also elite financial and forensic accounting experts. At first, their goal was simply to gather proof of infidelity and clarify asset division to protect my rights. But when they began digging into Logan Pierce's income sources to identify joint assets, one analyst noticed something suspicious. The young investigator pointed at a complex money flow chart on the big screen. "Carmen, look here. These are Logan Pierce's salary and bonuses from the Manhattan International Center project. The figures are high, but still reasonable. However, when we traced transactions connected to Hannah's father's construction company, we found several irregular payments." He zoomed in on a set of data. A massive portion of the project's funds had been funneled into a series of newly established material suppliers. These companies had no operational history, vague tax addresses, and had all been registered just before the project began. Carmen narrowed her eyes, her instincts told her something was wrong. "Go on," she said. The expert nodded. After receiving the money, these shell companies transferred nearly all of it, keeping only a small percentage into dozens of personal accounts through hundreds of small transactions to avoid detection. It took us a long time to trace the flow. He paused, took a deep breath, then pointed to a name on the screen. And finally, a significant portion of the funds ended up in one offshore account. "The account holder is Logan Pierce." The room fell silent. Everyone understood the gravity of it. This was no longer a civil divorce, it was a criminal case involving financial fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. If even one of those charges held up, Logan and Hannah Moore's father could both face prison. The puzzle pieces suddenly fit together. Logan's meteoric career, his lavish Manhattan lifestyle, they weren't built on talent alone, but on dirty money. He wasn't just a cheater, he was a criminal. Carmen immediately called me. She didn't share details over the phone, she asked to meet in person. In the elegant living room of my villa, I silently read through the stack of documents she handed me. I had always known Logan was ambitious and pragmatic, willing to do anything to climb higher, but I never imagined he would abandon every shred of integrity, trampling over ethics, his profession, and the law. This betrayal hurt far deeper than adultery. It didn't just taint love, it erased the humanity of the man I'd once trusted blindly. Carmen's voice was firm. Sierra, with this evidence, we won't just win the divorce. We can file criminal charges immediately. The decision is yours. I wasn't someone who enjoyed cornering others, but this time, it wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, about the safety of hundreds of people and the law itself. I turned to Carmen, my voice steady. Do everything by the book. Whoever committed the crime must face the consequences. That was the final card, the decisive blow that would end everything with Logan. A few days later, Logan received a new letter from Carmen Reed's firm. But this time, it wasn't a summons or asset proposal, it was a formal notice outlining suspicious financial transactions tied to the Manhattan Project, with blurry photocopies of the offshore transfers made under his name. The letter didn't threaten directly, but its warning was unmistakable. The moment Logan saw those numbers, his world collapsed. A cold sweat ran down his back, his hands trembled uncontrollably. It's over, he thought. Sierra knows everything. She doesn't just want the money, she wants me in prison. Panic completely consumed his reason. He stormed out of his office like a madman, searching for Hannah. She was in the living room, feeding Noah yogurt. Logan threw the letter onto the table, the thud making the baby cry. What is this? Explain it. Startled, Hannah quickly soothed the child, then picked up the paper. When she recognized the numbers, her face went pale. I don't know anything, she stammered, avoiding his eyes. Logan lost all patience. He grabbed her shoulders, shaking her violently, almost shouting, "Stop pretending. How long are you going to lie to me? Sierra knows everything. She has proof. We're going to prison, do you understand?" The word prison stabbed straight into Hannah's deepest fear. The fragile, pitiful mask she'd worn for so long shattered. She burst into tears, real ones this time, trembling as she confessed, It was my father's idea. He said the project needed cash flow, that it was just a temporary loan, he promised to return it. Logan let out a hysterical laugh. A loan? Setting up shell companies to wire money offshore is your idea of a loan? Then why the hell was it transferred into my account? Hannah sobbed harder. Because you were the chief architect. Using your account made the expenses look legitimate. My father said it was safer that way. I just wanted Noah to have a good life. I thought the money belonged to our family. When we got married, my money was your money too. Wasn't it? But instead of softening him, her words sent a chill through Logan's spine. He released her and stepped back, staring at Hannah as if seeing her true face for the very first time. In his mind, all the scattered pieces suddenly fit together perfectly. She had shown up in Manhattan gentle, understanding, loving unconditionally. It had all been a carefully staged performance. He wasn't the man she loved, just a tool, a pawn with temporary value. What they really needed from him were his title as chief architect, his signature, and his bank account. The love he once idealized, the excuse he'd used to betray the woman who truly loved him, had been nothing but a con. A sharp pain gripped his chest, stealing his breath. He had thrown away the woman who loved him, given up a peaceful life, for an illusion of his own making with a pair of swindlers. Logan collapsed onto the sofa, eyes empty. He had lost everything: his career, his reputation, his love, and soon perhaps his freedom. After the violent argument, the apartment sank into a deathly silence. Even Noah's cries had stopped. Hannah sat in the bedroom, holding the child, sobbing quietly. Logan sat motionless, staring at the dried wine stain on the carpet, feeling like a ship slowly sinking into an icy sea. Fame, wealth, love all slipping through his fingers. Even the new love he'd once used to justify his betrayal had been a sham. He was nothing more than a pawn, a convenient tool. Hannah stepped out of the bedroom, her eyes swollen but her voice forced calm. She knew she couldn't fight him now. The only way to hold on to him was to play weak, to use her last weapon, softness. She sat beside him, her tone gentle. "Baby, I'm sorry. I said terrible things earlier because I was angry. Please don't be mad at me. This isn't the time to fight. We need to work together to fix this, right? Logan said nothing. Hannah continued, placing her hand on his cold one. No matter what happens, we still have Noah. He's still little, he needs both of us. For his sake, let's get through this together, okay? The word, child, made Logan's eyelids twitch. He turned to look at the woman beside him. Her face was still beautiful, but to him, it was nothing but a mask, grotesquely fake. Every word from her mouth had an agenda. He brushed her hand away, his voice hoarse and cold. Do you actually love me or just my title as chief architect? Hannah tried to look offended. What are you saying? Of course I love you. Logan laughed, a hollow, bitter sound, sadder than tears. Love me? Or love what I could give you and your father? The contempt in his eyes pushed Hannah past her breaking point. She couldn't pretend anymore. Fear and rage exploded inside her, turning into venom. And what if I do love you? What if I don't, huh? Logan Pierce. Look at yourself. What do you even have now? Your career's ruined, your money's gone, you're about to go to prison. You think you're still worthy of being loved? The argument ignited again, fiercer than ever. If I'd known, I'd rather die than get mixed up with a woman like you. Logan roared. Hannah screamed back, her face twisted with fury. You think it's been easy for me? Putting up with you? Having your child? You should be grateful you even have me and Noah. In a fit of rage, Hannah blurted out the words that would haunt her forever. She laughed bitterly, her tone dripping with venom. If it weren't for this kid, do you think you'd be worth anything to us? It was like lightning struck through Logan's skull. The world froze. The shouting, the crying, the sound of things breaking, everything disappeared. Only her words echoed in his mind. If it weren't for this kid, do you think you'd be worth anything to us? Worth anything. The kid. A horrifying suspicion, one he'd never dared to consider, surfaced like a monster from the depths. He turned his head slowly, his eyes empty, icy, staring toward the bedroom where Noah slept. That child, the one he'd proudly called his son, his heir. Was he really his? Or just another illusion, a lie crafted to chain him? Seeing his expression, Hannah's face went pale. She realized what she had just said and stammered. No, that's not what I meant. I didn't mean that. I was angry, I said something stupid. But Logan wasn't listening anymore. He stood silently and walked to his study, locking the door behind him. That night, when Hannah and the child were asleep, Logan quietly entered the bedroom. His eyes no longer held the warmth of a father, only the sharp focus of an investigator. He gently picked up a few strands of Noah's hair from the pillow, wrapping them carefully in a clean tissue. Then he plucked one of his own. Clutching both samples in his trembling hands, his heart pounded violently. He had to know the truth. No matter the cost, he had to know. The next few days passed like hell. Neither spoke a word. Logan drifted through the apartment like a ghost, while Hannah lived in constant fear, too terrified to ask what he had done that night. He spent most of his time in front of the computer, not working, but refreshing his inbox over and over. He was waiting for the final verdict of his life. He had sent the 2 hair samples to the National Forensic Genetics Center in Chicago under an anonymous name. They had promised to email the results within 3 business days. Every second felt like torture. He couldn't sleep, lost weight, his stubble grew wild, he looked 10 years older. Sometimes he would watch Noah playing, searching for traces of himself in the boy, but the more he looked, the less he saw. The smile, the eyes. Nothing resembled him. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, as he sat in a daze, a new email notification appeared. Logan's heart stopped. Sender: National Forensic Genetics Center. Subject: DNA test results, reference case. His hand trembled as he moved the cursor over the email. He took a deep breath, gathered every ounce of courage, and clicked. The PDF opened. The report was filled with technical genetic terms, but his eyes went straight to the final line, bolded, boxed in clear font. Based on the analysis of 24 STR genetic markers, the samples from the alleged father, Logan Pierce, and the child, Noah Moore, show 15 non-matching loci. Conclusion: the 2 samples have no biological father-son relationship. The words struck him like a sledgehammer to the skull. In that instant, Logan's entire world shattered. All sound vanished. He could no longer hear the TV, nor Noah's laughter, only the mad roar echoing inside his chest. He had lost everything: his career, his reputation, his wealth, the woman who truly loved him, and now, his final pride: his son. It had all been a perfect scam, a performance in which he was both the victim and the fool. They hadn't just stolen his money and his love, they'd made him raise another man's child. The humiliation was worse than the divorce, worse than the threat of prison. A dry, chilling laugh burst from his throat. Then he laughed harder, maniacally, laughing at his own stupidity, at the shamelessness of the people who betrayed him, and at how life had crushed him completely. Tears mixed with that insane laughter, echoing through the apartment, the laughter of a man who had lost everything. He collapsed onto the keyboard, his broad shoulders shaking violently. Once, he'd stood at the top, he'd had it all. But with one wrong decision, driven by greed and selfishness, he had destroyed everything with his own hands. Now he had nothing, utterly nothing. After the final shock of discovering the child wasn't his, Logan became a hollow shell. No more rage, no more fights. He expelled Hannah and the boy from the apartment, not out of hatred, but with a chilling, dead silence. He had lost it all. His architecture firm fired him to avoid scandal. Former partners cut ties, friends vanished. His accounts were frozen. He faced lawsuits from investors and clients. His luxurious Midtown Manhattan condo was about to be repossessed by the bank. From a talented architect at the peak of his career, he had fallen straight into the abyss with no way back. In those darkest, most desperate days, when alcohol and cigarettes could no longer numb the pain, the only image that surfaced in his mind was me. Not the cold, successful woman wrapped in silk, but the version of me from the past, the gentle, understanding wife who stood by him in hard times. I was the last lifeline he could cling to. Summoning the last of his strength, he went to my mansion on the Upper East Side. He no longer wore elegant suits, just a wrinkled shirt, faded pants, unshaven beard, messy hair, and bloodshot eyes sunken from sleepless nights. He looked like a beggar. He couldn't even get past the gate. The guard eyed him with disdain and stopped him. All he could do was stand across the street, waiting silently, hoping to see me. He waited from morning until night. When the streetlights flickered on, the familiar black Bentley finally appeared. As the car stopped at the gate, Logan rushed forward. I stepped out. Seeing him in that state, I didn't look surprised, as if I had already expected it. My gaze was calm, without the slightest ripple of emotion. The driver and guard started to intervene, but I shook my head gently, signaling them to step back. "What are you here for?" My distant tone shattered the last trace of pride in Logan. He looked at the woman before him, still beautiful, graceful as ever, then at his reflection on the car's surface, disheveled, ruined. The cruel contrast broke him completely. Without a word, he slowly knelt in the middle of the elegant street, under the yellow glow of the lights. The man who had once embodied pride was kneeling, for the first time in his life. Tears streamed down his face. "Sierra, I'm sorry." His voice trembled, choking between sobs. "I know it's too late, but I was wrong." He told me everything: how Hannah and her father had used him, their illegal dealings, how foolishly he'd believed in a fake love. Then came the most painful, humiliating confession: the baby isn't mine. I raised another man's child. I'm a fool, a complete joke. He lifted his tear-streaked face, looking at me with the desperate eyes of a wounded animal. "I've lost everything, Sierra, my career, my reputation, my friends. Everything. I'm going to prison. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm just begging you. For the years we were husband and wife. Help me once. Just this once. Save me." His plea echoed weakly in the quiet night. He had thrown away all pride, clinging to the faint hope that the woman he'd once betrayed so cruelly might show mercy. I stood silently, listening to every word, every sob. The night breeze stirred the hem of my dress. There was no satisfaction in my eyes, no hatred. The man kneeling before me had once been my whole world. Now he was just a pitiful stranger, a faded memory. I spoke slowly. "Get up, Logan." He looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "Sierra, But my next words extinguished that hope completely. "Your downfall isn't because of me. I never sought revenge. Everything you're suffering now is the result of your own greed and choices. You chose betrayal. You chose the illegal path. You chose to believe in lies. You destroyed your own life. Don't blame anyone else. Logan said nothing. My words weren't emotional accusations, they were a cold, final sentence. I didn't even see him as a worthy rival for revenge, and that indifference hurt more than any insult. But what about the years we had together? He stammered. That ended the day. You brought another woman and her child into our home. I won't help you, but I won't harm you either. Let the law do its job. Whoever commits the crime must face the consequences. That's justice. I walked through the gate. The heavy iron door closed with a dry creak like a blade cutting the final thread between us. Logan remained kneeling, alone on the empty street. He knew it was truly over. A week later, the final divorce hearing took place. No shouting, no tears. Everything proceeded swiftly and precisely. The plaintiff, sat upright, calm, in an elegant beige suit. Logan Pierce, the defendant, looked gaunt, hollow-eyed, like a puppet with its strings cut. When the judge declared that the court approved the divorce based on undeniable evidence, Logan didn't react. I signed the papers with firm, decisive strokes, then stood and left the room without glancing at him once. The door opened, and bright midday light flooded the hallway. I squinted, taking a deep breath of fresh air. I was completely free. From that moment on, Logan's fate, the sentences he would face, had nothing to do with me. Ahead of me stretched an open sky where I could finally spread my wings. Justice may come late, but it never fails to arrive. The downfall of Logan and the Moore family was proof of that. After the divorce, all the financial evidence Carmen Reed's team had gathered was turned over to the authorities. A large-scale investigation began. The curtain hiding their filthy schemes was finally torn away. Confronted with irrefutable evidence, Logan and Hannah's father could no longer blame each other. They were exposed for creating a network of shell companies, forging contracts, and embezzling massive funds from the Manhattan International Center project. The media that once praised Logan now tore him apart. His and the Moore family's photos flooded the front pages. Architectural genius or notorious fraudster? Moore construction empire collapses under its own greed. In court, Logan was utterly broken. He confessed to everything, too defeated to resist. For embezzlement, money laundering, and zoning violations, he received a heavy sentence, burying the best years of his life behind prison bars. Hannah's father, the mastermind, was sentenced similarly. His once prestigious construction company declared bankruptcy. Assets were seized for restitution. Hannah Moore, though not directly involved, was convicted as an accomplice for concealing and profiting from the crimes. During the investigation, a shocking truth surfaced. Her real lover and Noah's biological father was the company's deputy director, a married man. Hannah and her lover had planned everything from the start, exploiting Logan's naivety and ambition, turning him into the perfect pawn to hide their affair and launder money. Her supposed love for Logan had been a performance, calculated down to every detail. When everything fell apart, her lover fled the country, leaving her to face the consequences. His powerful family used their wealth and influence to avoid charges, pushing all the blame onto Hannah. With no money, fading beauty, a suspended sentence, and crushing debt, Hannah finally paid the price for her greed and deceit. Noah, with no one left to care for him, was sent to a foster care center. Logan's mother, upon hearing that her son had been arrested and lost everything, suffered a massive stroke. Paralyzed and confined to a hospital bed, she spent the rest of her days alone and regretful. Her dreams of a wealthy daughter-in-law and a proud grandson vanished, leaving only pain and remorse in a cold, sterile room. You reap what you sow. The whirlpool of greed, betrayal, and lies ultimately destroyed itself, restoring peace to the innocent. Months later, when the public scandal had faded, my life returned to its radiant, peaceful rhythm. I no longer paid attention to news about them. To me, they were strangers, dust swept away by the wind. I poured my heart into two major projects: the exhibition space at the Crystal Atrium and the restoration of Havenbrook Silk Village. Under my leadership, the Phoenix Reborn project was a resounding success. The Silk Village came alive again from its ashes. Ancient houses were restored, preserving their old charm. The weaving workshops were modernized, and the looms once again echoed with the rhythmic clatter of shuttles. I persuaded the last remaining artisans to stay, paying them fairly and creating ideal conditions so they could pass down their nearly lost craft. I opened free classes that attracted many young people passionate about traditional craftsmanship. The village became not only an exclusive production center for Silken Soul, but also a cultural tourism destination. The project brought not just economic benefit, it revived a cultural legacy that had almost vanished. The reputation of Silken Soul soared to new heights. It became more than a luxury brand, a symbol of consciousness and deep human value. The woman I was had completely transformed. No longer the housebound wife, nor the iron lady always on guard. I had found perfect balance between work and life, a decisive leader, a creative artist. When away from work, I was simply myself again. I spent time reading, brewing tea, arranging flowers. Sometimes, I traveled alone to distant places, from Oregon's red forests to the old towns of California, to find inspiration and nourish my soul. I live a free and fulfilled life, unbound, unafraid of loneliness, and not seeking another relationship. I've realized that true happiness doesn't come from a man, but from wholeness and peace within one's own soul. I've found myself a stronger, happier version than ever before. Autumn in Sonoma Valley looks like a watercolor painting. Golden leaves drift softly along sunlit paths, and the scent of ripe grapes lingers in the breeze. I was there partly to oversee a craft project, partly to find inspiration for my new collection. After finishing work, I rewarded myself with a quiet afternoon, strolling through Jacob's estate, a historic vineyard transformed into an art park. I wore a long, pale blue silk dress, my hair loose, and held an old film camera in my hand. Avoiding the crowds, I chose the quieter paths, letting myself feel the subtle harmony between architecture, nature, and light. As I stood on a small wooden bridge, watching the colorful fish beneath the surface, a deep, familiar voice sounded behind me. If I'm not mistaken, this must be how a true artist finds inspiration. I turned around, a flicker of surprise in my eyes. A few steps away stood Richard Montgomery, smiling. He wasn't wearing a suit today, just a light gray jacket and casual khaki pants. He looked relaxed and approachable, no longer the stern, powerful businessman I remembered. Mr. Montgomery, what a coincidence. You're in Sonoma too. Richard walked closer, resting his hand on the railing beside me. I have an art hotel project here. I come by sometimes to check on things and to escape New York's noise. Seems we share the same preference. We stood there in silence for a while, both gazing at the lake. It wasn't an awkward silence, but the quiet of two kindred souls. After a moment, Richard said softly, I heard about your Havenbrook Silk Village project. It's truly meaningful. You're not only a talented artist but someone with a generous heart. I shook my head gently. I'm only doing what I believe is right. Embroidery has given me everything, so I want to give something back to where it began. We continued walking down the shaded paths. Our conversation wasn't about contracts or business but about art, about the way light and shadow intertwine on fabric, about the beauty of rebirth after pain. When we passed a gallery displaying handmade tapestries, Richard stopped before one depicting an eagle, a deer, and a phoenix, symbols of strength and renewal. He turned to me, his gaze deep and sincere. Seeing you today, I finally understand what true elegance means. It doesn't come from clothes or jewelry. It comes from the strength that follows the storm, from the peace after learning to let go of resentment. Miss Collins, I truly admire you. His words weren't flirtation but genuine recognition, respect from the heart. For the first time, a man saw beyond the polished surface, valuing me not for Silken Soul but for who I truly was. A warm feeling spread through my chest. I smiled, a bright, pure smile, like autumn sunlight. Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. That weekend, I returned to my villa in New York. Golden sunset light poured through the large window, bathing the room in amber glow. I brewed a pot of jasmine tea, its gentle fragrance filling the air. Holding my cup, I stood by the window, gazing at the skyline. The city was still bustling, proud skyscrapers, endless streams of cars. New York was as lively as ever, but my perspective had changed. In my mind, There was no trace of Logan or Hannah anymore. Those people, those stories, they had truly become the past. Like a nightmare that left a scar, but no longer any pain. I had learned how to forgive, not for them but for myself, to move on lightly. A fleeting thought of that afternoon in Sonoma Valley, of the man with the deep eyes and kindred spirit, brought a faint smile to my lips. It was a beautiful encounter, a possibility for the future. But I wasn't waiting nor rushing. My happiness no longer depended on having someone beside me. I set the teacup down and walked upstairs to the third floor, my private studio. The space was always tidy and calm, the scent of fresh silk mingling with sandalwood. It felt peaceful. I approached the walnut embroidery frame where a pure white piece of fabric had been placed. I didn't choose bright-colored silk this time. Only a smooth, soft white one, delicate as a baby's skin. My slender fingers stretched the fabric carefully and precisely. The silk was perfectly flat, uncreased like a blank page, ready for a new story. I opened the box of embroidery threads. Hundreds of shimmering silk spools glowed under the warm light. I didn't rush to choose, I simply looked, letting the idea slowly form in my mind. What would I embroider on this fabric? A fiery phoenix, symbol of rebirth? A white magnolia, symbol of serenity? Or a landscape of mountains and rivers, symbol of freedom? I didn't know, and I didn't need to decide yet. My life now was like that silk, its pattern and colors to be created by my own hands. I picked up a spool of jade green thread, the color of hope and new beginnings. My fingers skillfully threaded the silver needle. Under the soft golden light, I leaned slightly forward, my back straight, my gaze focused. The first stitch pierced the white silk, then the second, the third, slow, steady, confident. As I made that first stitch, I realized each of us has the right to embroider our own tapestry. No one escapes the tears or broken threads of life. But what matters isn't how torn the fabric once was. It's whether we have the courage to mend it, to make something beautiful again. Perhaps all of us, at some point, have been like me, trusting the wrong person, hurt so deeply we thought we'd never start over. But time and compassion teach us that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's how we free our hearts. And you? If you had to embroider the fabric of your life from the beginning, what color would you choose for your new journey? Share your thoughts in the comments. Who knows? Your story might give strength to someone still walking through the dark. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. If you'd like to continue this journey with me, one of rediscovering faith, courage, and love for ourselves, don't forget to follow, so you won't miss the next stories. Because here, we don't just listen to others' stories, we learn, together, how to write the next chapter of our own.